know this. But who know nothing for your king, we be the soldiers. Tell them not know this, know this. They put them back on notice. Flames explosion. Never did not beg, not beg, who not know this. But who know nothing for your king, we be the soldiers. Tell them not know this, boy. Flames explosions. Hey.
Don't listen to them niggas, they be lying to you. The most Hossin James and the voice is lying to you. More child in the roaring like a lion to you. Hope you feel the flames in our voice fine to you. You gotta go through something cause nobody do it better. Gotta get that Dr. Reggie, he the pseudo shit checker. Yeah, we bustin' pinatas when we test your ass. Cross that line and that captain, he gon' check your ass. Take a journey with your Mari out to Africa. He done took some people like the bottom tackler, bruh. It's only gonna cost a couple stacks, bruh. You ain't gon' find another deal better than that, bruh.
You never did not beg, not friend, who not know this. But who know nothing for your king, we be the soldiers. Tell them not know this, They put them back on notice. Flames explosion. Never did not beg, not friend, who not know this. But who know nothing for your king, we be the soldiers. Tell them not know this, boy. Flames explosions. Hey.
Trendsetter, who does it better than Sonetta? Get your lecture in the Bible and the Meta. What's the measure? Peace and black power, sisters and brothers. No whether you or yam, the Italian, the dead. At your leisure or leisure. Hearken to the teacher, several samurai swords, sever your souls out of the speaker. Fire on the preacher, tonight's double feature. If the Rastaman can't reach out, then bow to the creature. Apostles, they quiet, watching them carefully turn the page to paint a picture on the scripture. Now the whole crowd is outraged. Mighty Hebrew sovereign nationalism is risen from the grave. Baruch Atah, Allah highly him will break the chains.
They never did not beg, not friend, who not know this. But who know nothing for your king, we be the soldiers. Tell them not know this, They put them back on notice. Flames explosion. Never did not beg, not friend, who not know this. But who know nothing for your king, we be the soldiers. Tell them not know this, boy. Flames explosions. Hey.
Alright, what's good, family, man? This is your boy James Cassell over here, Concrete Biblical Truth. If you haven't done it yet, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. We're trying to get up to 1,000 viewers. Go ahead and help me make that. We're not too far away, people. Alright, today we're going to be talking about Pan's first round failure. He failed to disprove the concept of God in the first round. And we're going to get into that today. Let me go ahead and put the screen the way I want. Pull this on up. Okay. Now, what I want to point out about this, and it was from the intro he did, that all of these questions here, only one that's relevant is the very last question, the deist question. Everything else is completely off topic of this debate. I'm not here promoting Judaism or Christianity or Islam or any Indian traditions. I'm not here promoting it. The only thing I'm promoting is deism, the deist question. And his deist question is, if someone tells you they knew the universe began, would you believe them? And my response to that is, who cares if someone tells you that the universe began, in which no, what you would do is you would look at the scientific data, like the Bohr, Guth, and Verlinken theorem, the Big Bang cosmology. You would look at these things in order to determine whether the universe began to exist or not. And I definitely presented these things to him, so he can't run and hide behind that.
Okay, so the brother went with a lot of evangelical, fundamentalist evangelical people, right? William Lane Craig and the guys, you know what I mean? The Kalam.
Not one time did I mention William Lane Craig, but I did use an argument that William Lane Craig often uses in the Kalam cosmological argument, but I did not use his version of the argument. I used the Islamic version of the argument, that predates him by over 1,000 years.
Cosmological argument, which is a Islamic move from back in the day. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of
that is correct.
It's a lot of discussion. You know what I'm saying? I was falling asleep a little bit. The problem we have with all of that is
notice what he said. I didn't pay attention. That's what he's pretty much saying. He said I'm falling to sleep a little bit. That means you're not paying attention to what's being said, and that's going to be clearly shown throughout this round because you're not responding directly to what's being said. At best, you may give a comment on it, but you don't disprove or prove anything, really.
You can say that something was a cause of it, that something needed a cause. However, you have to demonstrate what that cause was.
He is affirming the principle of sufficient reason right now. He says you can say that something needs a cause. So let's make that clear. My step one, he agrees with. He didn't disprove step one. He just admitted to it.
That's where we still are at this moment. He has not demonstrated that a God was behind any of the things that you discovered.
I got all the way up to step 4 in this, and even started into step 5. Step 3 proves that God exists. Let's go to it real quick. Step 3 proves that God exists. Let's get to it. So step 1 is the principle of sufficient reason that's there. Step 2 is the universe began to exist. When he said, hey, if someone tells you the universe began to exist, would you believe them? No, because they didn't give you proof. Look at all this proof that the universe began to exist. Look at it. Look at it. This is proof upon proof. Here's the Borg-Guth-Vilenkin theorem paper. This is proof upon proof. I even quoted Alexander Vilenkin. It is said that an argument is what convinces reasonable men. An argument is logical, is what I put forth here that should convince reasonable men. And a proof is what it takes to convince unreasonable men. So he's saying that the fact that they're demanding scientific evidence shows that they're unreasonable. And why do people say that? Because a reasonable person, you should be able to dialogue with them and convince them based on reason. But an unreasonable person will say, no, I'm not willing to be convinced by reason. I need nothing but proof. Nothing but proof. And then he says, with the proof now in place, cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. There is no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning. Now, in all this, I gave source after source after source that explains how the Big Bang cosmology came to be and what the Big Bang cosmology says. He doesn't do any of that. I'm the one giving proof. He's the one just giving rhetoric. Look, I even laid the logical principle, the law of non-contradiction, the causal principle. Whatever begins to exist has a cause, which he just affirmed. So I don't understand what he means by no evidence for that. And then the next round, I say why the cause must be necessary. Look, it's exemplified in the principle of contingency and necessity. If something exists contingently, there must be a necessary being that explains it. That's clearly in my debate. I even used Alexander Rasmussen. I said Joshua Proust and Alexander Rasmussen. Physical reality, being contingent and variable, cannot be the necessary foundation of existence. These are PhD scholars. They know what they're talking about. I gave the impossibility of an infinite regress. I'm going to save that until he actually talks about it. So let's go ahead. That's all considered logical proof, logical evidence. But I guess, he doesn't understand how logic and reasoning works.
Discussing. And so part of the reason we get to that, are you seeing that change right there?
I did see it.
Did it change?
Pantheism, Spinoza.
Excellent.
Before we go into the change, we discussed in the preliminary that it's not going to be about pantheism, Spinoza, or anything like that. I made that clear in the preliminary. That's not what we're debating. He brought it here anyway to debate it. So he is off topic. He is completely off. He's going to spend most of this off topic.
So part of the reason why we are so philosophical all of a sudden that we're not really dealing with actual evidence is because we're trying to be like Spinoza and the God that Einstein believed in, right? Which is this disembodied, separate causation.
I'm not trying to be like anyone. I came to determinations on my own, and then I went and researched people who agree and disagree with me. That's what I did, and found that the closest thing to what I originally, because I originally did believe something that's very akin to his substance monolism. Spinoza is not a pantheist. If you do a quick Google search, you may get pantheism. But anyone who's actually read his information would challenge it and say, no, Spinoza was a substance monolith. And most of the time, when you put that in, Google will say, yes, he was. That's a more accurate representation of what he was. But let's go.
To the universe, right? Pantheism was popularized from the deism that Spinoza espoused, right? And I thought
Spinoza doesn't believe, well, he does believe in a causation to the universe, but he doesn't believe it's a mind. That's where me and him differ. I can't see, because he believes thought just exists. Not within a mind, not within anything, just pure thought. I don't believe that at all. Thought can only exist within a mind. Pure thought cannot have intentionality, which I talk about in my presentation. Pure thought can't have that. A person or a being with a mind has that.
It was hilarious when I saw pantheism, right? Because pantheism, right? That means you think Pan is the man, and I think that's awesome, right? So
I will give him that. Pantheism did come out of a variation of what Spinoza taught, but they changed a few things, just like I'd say how mine is slightly different from his. A pantheism is slightly different from substance monolism, and Spinoza was definitely a substance monolith who believed in pure thought, that pure thought existed and was the foundation to reality, not a mind, but just pure unadulterated thought. And he considered that the substance from which all things come from. That's why he's a substance monolith. He thinks that that one substance is equivalent to divinity itself, and that one substance is what all things are made and come from. That's Spinoza's stance.
The discussion that we've been listening to, the philosophical discussion, is just a euphemism.
That doesn't even follow that pantheism means that you think Pan is the man. At best, what he should have said was, you think Pan's God. That's what he should have said. Not Pan is the man. That's not what follows from that.
Euphemism for atheism. You really don't have an explanation or evidence for a God, so you're putting...
DMG, I have to ask, what deserved a bomb on that? That he made an illogical, incoherent statement? That this somehow pantheism, which means many gods, that's what pantheism means, somehow means Pan's the man? That didn't even make sense, DMG. Come on, at some point you have to only drop the bombs on things that are bomb worthy, not quick little sayings or illogical little gimmicky sayings, rhetoric. Like that don't deserve a bomb. Let's go. That is completely and emphatically wrong. Pantheism is not whatsoever a euphemism for atheism. And for him, let's look it up. Is pantheism a euphemism for atheism? Pantheism. Pantheism is the belief that God, wait a minute, so how is it a euphemism for atheism if pantheism is the belief that God and the universe are the same thing? Meaning everything that exists is part of God, or God is part of everything. How is that atheism? In what world is that atheism? Now let's look at what pantheism means. Does it mean Pan's the man? Like your boy DMG dropped, well, our boy, because I ain't mad at DMG. It ain't no beef or nothing like that. I just thought that didn't make sense. The definition, pantheism derived from the Greek word pan, which means all or many, and theos means God. Essentially, it means all is God, or God is all, not Pan's the man. And then monolism, because he is a substance monolism. Pantheism often aligns with monolism, the belief that everything's ultimately one substance and reality. See how it says it aligns with it? Because this is what Spinoza actually is, a monolith, but a substance monolith. But pantheism often aligns with it, so people will confuse them for one another. Nature as divine, meaning nature is God. Dude, how does pantheism have anything to do with atheism? Absence of a personal God, and that's important. Pantheism typically rejects the concept of a personal, intervening, or transcendent God as found in traditional theistic stances. So it's very close to deism. Very close. And if you see here, it says Baruch Spinoza, a philosopher, is often cited as a key figure in pantheist thought. Now watch this. Spinoza was a substance monolith, not pantheist. While often associated with pantheism, Baruch Spinoza was primarily a substance monolith, believing in one infinite substance, God or nature, rather than a creator God distinct from the universe, which is the deism stance as a creator God distinct from the universe. He believes they're one and the same. Let's get into it. Spinoza's core principal idea is that only one substance, which he identifies as God or nature. This substance possesses an infinite number of attributes, including those perceived as mind and matter. Perceives, because when you really get into what he thinks, like I said earlier, is a pure, unembodied thought, or a thought without a mind behind it that just generates things, which makes no sense to me, which is why I'm not a substance monolith or a pantheist. I'm a deist. Let's get back to the presentation.
The word God in where universe should be. The evidence of Spinoza himself being an atheist.
In pantheism, he said you put God in where universe should be, but if you look at him, it says no. They believe it's the same thing. And Spinoza specifically believes that the substance itself existed before the universe, then the universe came into being. But it comes from that substance. That's what he believes. So you're misrepresenting him a lot, and you're really fit to do it now.
Is here. You can check this out at your leisure. And like I said, I found another definition for pantheist. You know what I'm saying? It's the fervent belief man is man. So
notice what he does. He just claims Spinoza is an atheist, puts up a bunch of little clips and stuff, but he doesn't show how. But I do. So let's get into it. Is substance monolism atheism? Is pantheism? Wait, we'll do this one first. Then we'll do it pantheism atheism. No, substance monolism, which posits the existence of a single underlying substance or reality, does not inherently equate to atheism, although some forms of substance monolism, like naturalism, are often associated with atheism. So he's not a naturalist. He believes in the single substance that underlies reality. So you're just wrong on that. And I don't see why you have to misrepresent people's position in order to make a debate. And I really question whether people are paying attention and catching on to that. But let's keep it going, how he's making up definitions in what's supposed to be a scholastic debate. He's making them up. This is pure gimmick and rhetoric. This isn't debating. And anyone who voted for him needs to be ashamed of themselves.
The brother Victor Stenger, he did a response to all of those things that he actually just got finished mentioning, which is crazy. And Stenger concludes, you see here at the bottom,
What does that mean? The universe appears exactly as we expected if there were no God. He doesn't give us any context to what he's saying. Dude grabbed a Amazon profile description of a book and didn't give us nothing out of the book. And even in the profile, the only thing he says that argues against intelligent design arguments is based on biology. That means that people that argue that DNA is designed, not the fine-tuning argument. Where is that said here? Where is it said that he argues against the beginning of the universe? Where is it said that he argues against the principle of sufficient reason? Where does it say? Well, I guess you can assume that he comes to the conclusion that there's no necessary being needed to explain that, but that just means he is breaking the philosophical principle of sufficient reason. That's all that means he's doing. And he doesn't give us one quote out of the book, one line from the book. He just makes claims and doesn't validate them whatsoever. He doesn't give proof that his claim.
That beyond a reasonable doubt, the universe and life appear exactly as we might expect if there were no God, right? So through all the things he just mentioned, you know what I mean? And needing a cause, everything except for the.
So he says this book talks about everything, but it doesn't. Or at least he didn't demonstrate it did. He just claimed it did. Come on, man. I gotta ask y'all over at Paradigm Shift. Is just claims proof? It's just claims proof. Because he ain't proving nothing. He ain't going in detail on nothing. And I'm cool with it. And I'm talking more to, and I'm cool with it. It ain't no beef. So if they want to take it that way, that's them. But I'm not beefing or nothing like that. I'm just giving my review of the debate. That's it.
The eternal thing, I can't think of it right now, right? But saying that it couldn't have been, infinite regress, right? You have no evidence to say that is impossible. If it was happening, you don't know that a God was necessary for it to be an opposite way.
Notice what he did. He didn't give a reason why it's false. He didn't give a reason why the philosophical principle of causal finitism is false. He didn't give a reason. But let's go into it and see if I gave reasons why it's true. Let's get up here. Here. The cause must be necessary. Because the universe is contingent to not violate Occam's razor, which is another philosophical principle, which states you must not multiply beyond necessity. And multiply beyond necessity, we must posit a necessary being with causal power in accordance with the PSR. And he keeps saying, we don't know. But as I show, there is that I do have knowledge. And I have knowledge based on the principle of sufficient reason. Arthur Schopenhauer, in the 4-4 root of the principle of sufficient reason, he lays this out. He explains that judgment comes when concepts are linked according to the principle of sufficient reason, which he breaks into 4 categories, and 2 being relevant, right? The principle of sufficient reason of becoming, which talks about causality in the physical world, right? And this one, which is very important, the principle of sufficient reason of knowing, having logical justification for truth or proof. Since I do have logical justifications, which are proof, then I do have knowledge. Now, you can say you don't have knowledge, but I do, based on this principle. Then he also goes that judgments are formed when concepts abstracted from experience are connected logically under the second of the PSR of knowing. A true judgment is one where the predicate necessarily follows from the subject based on the laws of thought or the principles of logic. That's a true judgment. That means the judgment is true. So come on, that don't even work. And come on, we got to do better. Oh, wait. Let's give a little bit more. Let's give a little bit more. When I go into the cause must be necessary, I use two PhD philosophers to point out that the physical reality being contingent can't be the necessary foundation of existence. It must be something else. I laid that out. I'm giving academic scholars. He's giving his feelings and emotions. That's not the way debate goes. Then I went through two examples of the impossibility of an infinite regress and how it leads to logical absurdity. With the infinite train example, and it says it shows the absurdity of an infinite regress without a first mover, an engine or locomotive, nothing ever starts. And it was an argument for motion, right? So without something causing the initial motion, no motion can ever start. That's why the impossibility of an infinite regress leads to logical absurdities. You can't have motion without a primary mover. That's basic common sense. Then I gave the Grim Reaper paradox for Alexander Proust, a philosopher and mathematician and co-director of the graduate studies at Baylor University in Texas. Come on, man. And I laid that out. So how can one say, and then he says, well, you gave no proof that there can't be an actual infinite regress of things. Well, look at this principle of logic, the principle of causal finitism. An actual infinite series of causes cannot exist. This is a logical principle. I'm adhering to logic and reasoning. He's adhering to his feelings. That's just facts, because nothing he gave logically disproves a God. Emphatically disproves a God. Nothing. Come on, screen switch back. All right, nothing he gave, but let's get back to it. He says, I get caught rambling. That's all he's doing, making claims and continuing to talk with no actually validation of the claim.
So that whole thing, like, that's what I'm saying, when you get caught up trying to be like those evangelicals, you just get caught rambling, right? So what are we talking about when we say exist? We talking about to be real, right? Shout out to Cheryl Lynn, right? To be or to be real.
Notice he's cherry picking the definitions to try to help with his own argument. But to have being, you have to be in a specified place with respect to understood limitation of, but notice what it says, or, which means you don't have to be in a specified place with respect to understood limitations or conditions. There are understood limitations and conditions to science. I'm going to let you finish, then I'm going to get into it.
If something exists, it is present in the world as a real thing.
Notice what he says, if something exists, it's present in the world, but in his own image that he puts right here. Is God present within the world? Because this is the world. Time, matter, space, energy, that's the world. There's even a box around it to represent the space in which this world exists. But God is outside of it. So his own image example does not align with the information he has above it. That it has to be in a specified place, because it's not within any place within time, matter, space, or energy. He doesn't have it. He has it outside of it. If something exists, it must be present in the world as a real thing. But he doesn't have God in the world. He has God outside of the world. So let's see why he had to do it this way. Let's see why. Look, he said should be able to be observed and tested. Notice what he said. So let's go into this. The question was, science cannot adjudicate the God question. It says, yes, science by its very nature cannot definitively prove or disprove the existence of God. Wait a minute. As it focuses on the natural world and observable phenomena, while the concept of God often resides in a realm of the supernatural or metaphysical. So what is he talking about? That it has to be something within the world. Because science focuses on that, the natural world and the observable phenomenon within it. But it says God resides in the realm of the supernatural, metaphysical, which means he's outside of time, matter, and space, right? The scopes of science. Science operates within a framework of the natural world, seeking to understand and explain phenomena through observation, experimentation, and the development of a testable hypothesis. The supernatural nature of God. The existence of God, as conceived in many religions, often involves concepts that are beyond the scope of scientific investigation, such as the supernatural and the metaphysical. Bro, you're not even making sense right now. All right, let me see. Let's see if there's anything else that would. All right, let's do this right here. As the Harvard evolutionary biologist Stephen Jay Gould judiciously remarked, science cannot, by its legitimate methods, adjudicate the issue of God's possible intervention in nature. We either affirm or deny it. We cannot comment on it as scientists because, again, science cannot adjudicate the God question. So for him to keep saying that means he's making a clear category error. A clear and emphatic category error, or what is called a category mistake, which is a logical fallacy. And this proves that he doesn't even understand how argumentation works. He doesn't understand the logical principles that are supposed to be that's supposed to undergird your argument and supposed to limit your argument in scope. He doesn't understand that, and that's why he would make such a category error, which I pointed out.
Right, and should be able to be observed and tested, right? So I'm representing the hypothesis that there is no God as H, zero, no existence. F represents falsification.
F represents falsification. Falsification deals with science. I just went over how science does not adjudicate the God question. There is nothing in science that will confirm or deny the existence of God. It can't. People will affirm or deny the existence of God, just like the Harvard professor stated.
Right? All we need is one piece of undeniable evidence for it.
By evidence, he means scientific evidence, which cannot adjudicate the God question. So he's making a category error, and the judges should point that out and call that out, especially since I did.
God, and the hypothesis will be proven false, right? So we're going to play a little game of where is Waldo Pandiego. First and foremost, this moral thing that he's talking about, morality, is ingrained in us, right?
I notice what he says, this moral thing he's talking about, morality. I never made an argument from this. This is a blatant straw man and misrepresentation of my position. What judge would call this good? I have to know. And I understand that DMG and them, they're going to promote it. They already said before the debate, well, the DMG didn't say, Craig said that he wants Pan to win. They had a moderator in our debate that jumped in the middle of the debate and started arguing with me, trying to push things on me, which I give Pan credit for, saying, no, that's not what the brother was trying to say. But this is what's going on. That doesn't make any sense to me. Why is he allowed to make a straw man and the judges don't hold that against him? That's weird. Why y'all didn't call it out?
We know that infants need to be taught good and bad, right from wrong, right? Morality has been found to not be found in babies, right? There's a number of studies on that. But here we see the friend ready.
Notice what he does. He says, hey, there's a number of studies on there. Read nothing from the studies whatsoever. But again, this whole argument is a straw man. I never said anything about morality whatsoever. I called him out on it in the question and answer round on asking me questions that had nothing to do with anything I was claiming. And then he said, oh, well, I was trying to prove or disprove the concept of God. How did that disprove the concept of God in any way, shape, or form? Because babies have to be taught morality. What the hell? Like, that ain't a proof of nothing, but that babies have to be taught morality.
Experiment, right? Disproving spontaneous generation, where the maggots formed on meat that was open in a container that was closed.
How does this disprove spontaneous generation? In this whole thing, nothing's spontaneous. Nothing just pops up out of nowhere. Maggots come from flies. They're fly babies. Nothing spontaneous about this. Or at least his description of it doesn't disprove it. It must be something more to the
Cloth
argument.
they didn't form in a container that was closed with sheer cloth where the flags could.
And also, who argued that spontaneous generation happens? I mean, to say the universe doesn't have a cause would be spontaneous generation because it just popped up out of nowhere. So you're making an argument for spontaneous generation when you stand against an infinite regress of events, which goes against the principle of causal finitism. That was your stance. So I think DMG pointed out, he said, you know what, you need to watch James's presentation a few times because, yeah, mine was very philosophical in nature. It dealt with a lot of the principles and rules of logic and reasoning and properly utilizing those rules, while he is just throwing things at the wind, not actually proving anything he's saying. He's just making claims. If anything he proved here, he proved that the universe cannot exist without a cause. That's the only thing this right here proves.
The maggots formed on top. Why is that important? Well, in the pan-ready experiment, we disprove that human beings.
Yeah, so the flies can smell it, so they put their babies there in hopes that their babies will have a food source. What are you proving about disproving anything spontaneous? This is basic common sense that flies want to lay want to lay eggs, where the eggs will have something to eat when they're born.
Religious beliefs, morals, or values, right? Because when people are raised in religious environments, we know they have them. But when people are shielded from those thought processes, they have no concept of these.
So what does proving or disproving that human beings are born with religious belief have to do with disproving a God? If anything, if what you're saying is true, which I stand against it firmly because we evolve to be religious, which means we're born with it. Now, it may not manifest into our brains can catch up to it, right? But it's still there. It's innate. There are studies after studies that go into talking about babies are not born irreligious, non-religious. They have all the fundamental things necessary to, once their mind develops properly, form religious beliefs. And that's why you have to teach children morality, because their brains haven't caught up. And they need to learn these things early on before they get set in bad ways. That's why religious books like the Bible will say, train your child up in the way he should go and he will not depart from it, right? Because you have to teach your child how to act appropriately because their frontal lobe hasn't fully formed and they can't do this on their own. Their cognitive skills aren't there yet, not the underlying skills that would have them to have belief. Notice what he says, that when they're shielded from this, they have no concept of these God beliefs. But notice what he's saying, religion. He's arguing against religion, not the concept of God, right? Because are you telling me the first person that ever came to the thought process that something like a God exists had to read it from someone? Because that's the logical conclusion from your argument, that the first person that ever thought that a God exists had to read it from someone, which makes no logical sense because they'll be the first person that ever thought of it. Come on, Pan. Like nothing Pan said proves or disproves the existence of God. At best, he's making a good case against religion.
God beliefs that you guys are talking about. I saw somebody in the comments said, the hood never told you nothing about deism. So, where do these concepts come from if you don't sit there and start reading all these things or fewer brought up?
It says that the hood didn't teach you about deism. Well, who is to say I spent all my life in the hood? Who said that? Like, that doesn't even make sense. If anyone knows my family, my aunt is a leading curator at the first all-black female and all-female curated museum ever. She was the curator of Houston's Museum of Contemporary Arts for years. My family was well off, made good money. We did not have to grow up in the hood. Now, my mom liked to be in the hood. That's where she grew up. That's where she liked to stay. But even she eventually, when we got more towards the teen years where, you can get more into trouble, moved up out of the hood. So don't sit here and tell me what I learned and where I learned it from. Logic and reasoning is something that is innate to human beings. And I reasoned on this for a long time, taking the position of agnosticism and seeing which position made more sense, atheism or theism. And once I seen theism had more compelling arguments that supported it, then from there it's what form of theism? Should I be a classical theist? Should I be a Christian? Should I be a deist? Or should I have some form of deism that also aligns with Christianity? And that's what I have, a form of theism that can be shown to align with Christianity, but not this religious thing, because I'm anti-religious. That's why it's deism, not Christianity. Well, I hate to use the term Christianity. I'll say Hebrew Israelite views. A deism that aligns more with Hebrew Israelite views, because as Israelites, most of us, I can't say all, many of us do not believe the Father has ever engaged with the creation whatsoever. We believe an intermediary does that for us.
Like, then the evidence is of such, 63% of people raised in a two-family atheist environment grow up with no religious beliefs at all.
Yeah, they grew up without religious beliefs, but most of them still believe in God, right? Notice, he's making an argument against religion, not an argument against God.
He's taught and learned, right? And here's the evidence of those things that I just mentioned. So now the youth.
Morality is taught and learned because you teach and learn the morality for your society, not morality itself. Because the question becomes then, how did the first person ever come to morality or morals and values? How? Because according to you, they couldn't do it on their own without a religion, but they would have had to come to this well before we even evolved religions.
Temporal dilemma is are things good because God said so, or is it?
Again, he says, here is the evidence, but never goes into the evidence. How is that debating? How can you just assert something is true in a debate without proving it's true? You just skip over the evidence itself. You want to know why? Because it ain't no evidence to prove that.
Does God says it's good because it's good, right? And this is the whole ancient text, right? But he's not really looking at that. You don't want to focus on nothing specific, and I get that. But
the Euphoria dilemma is, again, is a moral argument, which is a straw man. I've never made anything about a moral argument. He goes in earlier saying that I'm making a moral argument, which I never made. And he's continuing on with the straw man of this, which is why I didn't respond to it. I just pointed out that he was straw manning me. And then he cried, "Oh, I'm not straw manning." Yeah, you did. You straw man. But the answer to the Euphoria dilemma is because it's God's nature. That's it. It's a very simple answer that's been accepted again and again in philosophy, that is the answer, that it is God's nature to be good. The very one of the definitions of a maximally great being is an all good being. And by morality, we mean good. To be moral means to be good. So it's his nature. It's not because he said so. It's not because God loves it. It's because it's who he is. Period. This tells me you don't read academic literature. It tells me you didn't even look at the responses to that. You just grabbed something and said, "Hey, this looks good for the debate. Let me just throw it in here." I mean, his debate format, I don't even see logical coherence in it. It's just a gish galloping. That's purely what it is. I'm just going to throw out a bunch of evidence that's off topic, because nothing here has been on topic except his sidebar comments of the debate. in response to the things that I said, which he just kind of says, oh, well, that doesn't mean it's true, and just goes on. But I'm actually giving reasons why it's true.
Just further evidence that, morality is not a universal thing that is ingrained in everybody, because everybody has different moralities. And here's evidence of it in the animal kingdom, as well as all around the world, continuously to this day, where cannibalism is practiced, right?
Saying everyone has a different morality doesn't mean it's not ingrained, because then why does everyone have morality then? You seem to be claiming that it was taught. Then how did the first person become a moral being then? You're confusing moral relativism and saying moral relative. That's what you're just arguing, that moral relativism is true instead of objective moral values are true. Which you should have just came out and said that instead of throwing up a Euphemal dilemma that has nothing to do with the argument whatsoever. Instead of straw manning me and saying I'm making moral arguments that I'm not making. How does cannibalism prove or disprove a God? Like, this stuff doesn't even logically cohere to an argument that no God exists. If anything, it adheres to we have a bunch of religions and religion may be wrong. That's at best what his argument is.
The concept of evil by itself. Now, this is Brother Cassell's favorite source, so I had to snap
not my favorite source, but I definitely use it for general philosophical things, like to just draw off of, because it's easily accessible to anyone. Anyone can go to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy and pull these things.
You can skip all the way down to the bottom there, and it says, due to the concept of evil, there's reason to believe that an all-powerful, all-knowing.
If we go into this concept of evil thing, and I might do a separate video just on that, the concept of evil, right? If we go into it, most atheists do not believe evil exists because they understand the issue with believing evil exists. Because of the fact that evil is a derivation from the good, if evil exists, the wrong or the evil exists, that means the good exists necessarily because it's a derivation from it. And the good, according to most theists or deists, is God. So you can't have evil without good because evil depends on good. So this argument actually proves a God exists to use the concept of evil. That's why you have people like Richard Dawkins who will say that the universe just has pitiless indifference, right? Or you have atheists like, I think, Daniel Dennett and others, the more educated atheists, not your Matt Dillahunty's, which is what he does. He does a Matt Dillahunty routine. But the more sophisticated and academic atheists, they'll tell you this is a horrible argument to bring up evil, because evil is a derivation from the good, and therefore if evil exists, the good must exist. Now, what people would say in this, they would say gratuitous evil. Now, that is an argument to talk about. Gratuitous evil is unnecessary evil, or what they would consider unnecessary evil, like natural events, things like that. But the response to this is we don't know if God doesn't have a sufficient reason for why he allows these things to happen. Because it could be very much possible that by allowing these things to happen, that it brings more people to him. That's possible. But again, this is what happens when people don't look at the response. Like, let me see if I can bring that up. Let's see. All right. Some argue that the existence of evil rather than being Some argue that existence of evil, rather than being evidence against God, actually points to God's existence by demonstrating the need for ultimate moral standard and a source of justice. The problem of evil. The existence of evil and suffering is often used as an argument against the existence of God, right? Let's see if it gets down to counter arguments. Some argue that the problem of evil is a valid argument against the existence of God and implies that God is either unwilling or unable to prevent evil. Now, notice it doesn't imply that God doesn't exist. That's the issue that they have, right? All it may imply is that a certain religion's God don't exist. Others, which is my stance, suggest that evil is a lack of good, a privation, or as I say, derivation, rather than something created by God, right? So when you believe that it's a derivation from the good, to say that evil exists means that the good exists. So God exists and beings that derive it, or God exists and beings have the ability to not obey God, which that would be evil. To not obey the good is evil, period. Like, this is basic common sense, but he'll use that as the foundation of his argument, which I think was a horrible decision.
All good creator does not exist. Boom. I mean, this is your source, not mine, bro. Right? So the human construct of the laws of nature about good and bad, right and wrong, right? Even Spinoza said.
See, notice we said all powerful, all knowing, all good creator does not exist, but evil doesn't prove that by itself. Gratuitous evil would be the argument, and he doesn't make that argument. The concept of evil actually affirms the concept of good, and if good exists, then God exists by definition, because God is the good. Anyone who's read the philosophical literature on this topic knows that God is the good.
By good, I shall understand what we certainly know to be useful to us, right? He's talking survival of the fittest right there, right? And reason demands that
the laws of nature have nothing to do with good and bad, right or wrong. That's morality. So I'm trying to figure out, man, like, what is the dude even talking about? He makes up definitions for terms that don't exist. Show me that the laws of nature have to deal with morality. Let's look at what the laws of nature are, because dude is tripping. The laws of nature are fundamental, universal, and constant principles that describe how the natural world operates, encompassing everything from behavior of subatomic particles to the motion of planets. Where the hell does it say morality? Where? Let's go down. Britannica, the law of nature in the philosophy of science, a stated regularity in the relations or order of phenomena in the world that holds under a stipulated set of conditions, either universal or in a stated proportion of instances. What are the 7 laws of nature? Let's see if morality is one of them. The 7 laws of nature: the law of attraction, the law of polarity, the law of relativity, the law of cause and effect, the law of rhythm, the law of gender and gestation, the law of perpetual transmutation of energy. Where in here does it say the law of morality is a law of nature? Dude is just making up stuff. And I gotta ask y'all, like, you know what, I'll do it on the next part. When did I use Spinoza to justify the good? And when did Spinoza say that the good is a law of nature? Like, dude is just putting things out there that aren't said by me, that I'm not pushing, and saying that I am. And he's trying to use Spinoza, which we said in the prelims would not be part of the debate. So he's off topic. And he's just blatantly wrong. The laws of nature is not morality.
Everyone seeks its own advantage. Earlier, the brother was talking about everything demands a reason, sufficient reason. And the reason for most things is
yet you give no reason why I'm wrong about anything. You just said I am. No sufficient reason whatsoever.
Of the fittest. Shout out to the squadron. You feel me? Right? So we also know that the laws of nature, laws of physics, have changed in the past and possibly will change in the future, right? Here's evidence of that. We're not about to read all that.
But he says the law of nature and the laws of physics is morality. Is that what this says? This is talking about science. It says scientists have discovered an exception to a 200-year-old scientific law that governs how heat diffuses through materials, right? So what the hell does this have to do with morality? Which is what his whole argument about what the laws or the laws of nature are talking about. These things don't even align with one another. One is talking about science, one is talking about morality. Morality ain't science. So we have to ask, what the hell are the judges judging from his stance? What is he proving? He's actually contradicting himself again and again and again and again. Like, this is horrible.
Unless, listen, please don't miss it, though.
Notice what he says. Here's evidence of that. Didn't read a damn thing from his alleged evidence. Didn't read a single thing. You want to know why he couldn't read it? Because when he started talking about scientists and science, it would have clearly showed, wait a minute. He just tried to argue that the laws of nature were morality. Now he's saying it's something else? Come on, man.
And we know that the laws of nature, laws of physics, whatever, have changed so drastically that people were tried for heresy.
Notice what he's saying, the laws of nature, then he also calls it the laws of physics. So he is conflating the two with morality. Because morality has nothing to do with the laws of nature or physics. Nothing. And also, we discover that we're wrong, not that the laws of nature are wrong. The laws of nature are descriptions of what happens in the universe. So our descriptions can be wrong, but the laws cannot be wrong because you will observe them every time. That's what a law is.
Because of challenging it. And other people were hung, but, that's another guy named Giordano Bruno.
Look, he said the laws of nature change so drastically, people are tried for heresies. No one has ever been tried for heresy in accordance with the laws of nature. Ever. You try for heresy because people think that you're standing against God. And people also misrepresent what Galileo was in prison for because the church funded Galileo. It was a very specific thing that he was in prison for, and it didn't really have nothing to do with his science, but his personal views. So you need to get that right. Let me see if I can Google that real quick. You know what, I might make a separate video on that. I don't want to make this video too long because he's almost done.
All right, so I could keep going. What's the time check, DMG?
Time is 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
He has 3 minutes. Now, I'm just pointing out to y'all, in no time anywhere in this does he go into laying out any of his argumentation. He just jumps out, says something, then claims it's true, and move on to the next position. That is not the way debates work. You have to give reasons, sufficient reasons for why your claim is true. And let's go back to my presentation real quick, because I do believe that's part of it. Let's go up. Four truths. Here we go. The principle of sufficient reason, right? Four truths. Every statement must have a reason it is true. And he needs to lay out that reason, not just claim it's true and move on. Because anyone can grab anything and say, hey, this right here supports me and move on. But like I showed with that one scientific article, he's misrepresenting the laws of physics and nature and trying to conflate them with morality. Come on, man. People got to do better than this, bro.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and stop there, bro.
He's not going to stop here. There's too much time on the table, and he knows he's going to gish gallop some more. He's going to throw some more rhetoric out there.
Actually, hold on. I'm not going to stop there. Just another point. What was just to respond to a couple of the things that your brother said. Like I said, it was a cosmological argument. You know, a lot of these things that the evangelical fundamentalists.
Notice he keeps just saying evangelical fundamentalists, but not one scholar I presented in my argumentation is an evangelical fundamentalist. Not one. So the question becomes, what the hell is he talking about? Why does he keep straw manning me and straw manning my position? I have no quote from an evangelical at all. All of them are PhD philosophers or PhD scientists. That's it. That's all I used. Not one time did I use any evangelical.
People go with. They still have yet to present a guide to be at the cause and at the foundation of their system, right?
I emphatically did that. I've already showed y'all earlier that I did do that because I got all the way through round 4 in my round 1, and I went first in the round because I'm the affirmative. So I went first. At step 3, it comes to a God exists. Step 4 tells us what attributes this God could have as far as intelligence is concerned. And step 5 actually proves that it's a mind, because Spinoza is a substance monarchist who didn't believe in a mind behind the universe. He thought it was pure thought without a mind. And I was laying it out to show that, wait a minute, a mind makes the most sense in step 5. So, and I'll go over it one more time. Let's go over it one more time for the people who might have missed it. Let's go. Right here. Premise 12, which is based on step 3. The universe is necessary. Right? The cause of the universe is necessary. Right? I didn't put a check mark by this one because I don't really think it deserves one, to be honest. But this one definitely does, because it gives us an attribute of this God that I'm talking about, which the fine-tuning of the universe suggests intelligence, that God is an intelligent being. And then premise 14, consciousness points to a fundamental mind, which is step 5, which gives us this conclusion, right? And if the premises are true, which he didn't refute any of my premises, then it logically follows that the conclusion is true, which amounts to a proof or evidence. The best explanation for the origin of the universe, fine-tuning, and consciousness is a timeless, spaceless, immaterial, intelligent, personal, because in here I point out that intentionality can only come from persons and minds, necessary, and mind, because fundamental mind followed from premise 4. He didn't even deal with the hard problem of consciousness at all, never even mentioned it. So he doesn't argue against a fundamental mind. And that's the issue I have. He doesn't argue against anything I'm saying. He admits there must be a necessary cause, but he's saying we don't know the nature of that necessary cause. But based on the fine-tuning, the fact that the universe began to exist, time, matter, and space came into being, the fact that consciousness is a fundamental, separate foundation to reality, separate from the material world, well, at least this. And the evidence says a being like what we call God exists. Now, if a being like what we call God exists, that means God exists. That's what logically follows from that statement. A being like what we call God exists. What logically follows is a God exists, and I do it in the very next side. There is, at minimum, the deistic God. At minimum. So anyone who's saying that I didn't emphatically prove it with the statement is just false. And I pointed that out even in the question and answer period.
They talk to you all day long about what they feel and what they think, right? And
that's literally what you're doing, Pan. Your whole argumentation is what I feel and what I think. You haven't went into any scientific data. You haven't went into any of the studies or even like your argument from evil. You didn't even go into it and why that means no God exists. You just say that it means that without giving a reason. And that's cherry picking. That's, oh, I'm just going to go in here and grab the sentence that agrees with me and never give the people a reason why it's true.
They could philosophize like the brother, me and the brother Cassell got into it over the Oppie dude, right? And he wanted to tell me what Oppie thinks. As a matter of fact, let's go back to that real quick. How much time I got left?
Yes, I'm telling you who is considered the most respected and one of the most brilliant atheists of our modern time thinks on the topic, because what he thinks just aligns with the philosophical standard, just like everyone else in philosophy. Well, I won't say everyone. Well, those who don't do it admit that they're using the psychological definition. They don't try to act as if the psychological definition is in opposition to God existing or not. Psychological definition is just how you feel about it, which is your whole definition is about how you
feel. Right? So
you got 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Perfect. So on the definition of atheism, this is where we really originally clashed, and we can go ahead and knock this out right now for Brother Wavy as well. You see here in pink.
Now, what I'm gonna do is pause it here before he goes into it. He tries to, you know what? Let him do it first. Let's let him do it first.
Brother likes to say in philosophy, however, and more specifically in philosophy of religion, atheism is standardly used to refer to the proposition that a God does not exist. But if we go down to the blue right here, of course, from the fact that atheism is standardly defined in philosophy as that God does not exist, it does not follow that it ought to be defined.
So he admits that my definition is the standard academic definition in philosophy. Let's point that out now, that he's admitting it when he says that.
In that way, right? And so we had to make sure we threw a dagger in his source on that publicly.
Yes, it says it does not follow that it ought to be defined that way. You want to know why it says that? Because in philosophy, you have to give reasons. You can't just say something is true because you want it to be true. You have to give sound, logical reasons that is true. And this article gives you 3 of them. It gives you 3 of them. So let's go back and let's see how the article gave him 3 of them. And he just skipped over it. Okay. It says, as he stated, of course, from the fact that atheism is standardly defined in philosophy as the proposition that God does not exist, it does not follow that it ought to be defined that way, right? And guess what? It gives 3 reasons why it ought to be defined that way. Because you can't just say it should be defined that way without reasons, right? It says right here, a second reason for preferring the metaphysical definition, which is the standard definition. And this is that 2 main alternatives, it has undesirable implications. Defining atheism as naturalism has the awkward implication that some philosophers are both theists and atheists. This is because some philosophers deny that God is supernatural and affirm both naturalism and theism, like pantheists, right? Like he brought up pantheists. Defining atheists as denying that God is supernatural and affirming both naturalism and materialism. And that's why he said earlier that another word for for pantheism is atheism, because he's doing what it said is problematic. His own source said it's problematic. Because what it does is it conflates the two and makes it so you can define some theists as atheism, even though pantheism is clearly not atheism, right? It says defining atheism as the state of lack of belief in God faces similar problems. First, while the definition seems short and simple, which is virtuous, it needs to be expanded to beyond the issue of babies, cats. It needs to be expanded to avoid the issue of babies, cats, and rocks. They jump on the issue of babies, but the actual philosophers in his own source, says, nah, you're not supposed to use babies, cats, and rocks, counting as atheists by virtue of lacking belief in God. While this problem is relatively easy to solve, another is more challenging. This additional problem arises because one can lack belief in God while at the same time having other pro-attitudes towards theism. For example, some people, and he skips over that. So let's get to the third reason. Like, it's laying out reasons why to prefer the definition that I use. But he uses it and lies on the source and says that the source is not saying that. Now, a third reason to prefer the standard definition in philosophy is that it makes definitions of atheism and theism symmetrical, right? They're supposed to be opposed to one another, diametrically opposed to one another. But the way he does it, they're not diametrically opposed to one another. One problem with defining atheism as a psychological state is that philosophers do not define theism as a psychological state, nor should they. Theism, like most other philosophical isms, which this really needs to be pointed out to Super Wavy, that theism, like most other philosophical isms, is understood in philosophy to be proportionate. This is crucial because philosophy at first want to say theism is true or false, and most importantly, to construct or evaluate arguments for theism. Psychological states cannot be true or false, nor can they be evaluated conclusions of arguments. Now, I'm going to state that again. Psychological states cannot be true or false, nor can they be conclusions of arguments. Granted, philosophers sometimes define theism as the belief in God, that God exists, and it makes sense to argue for a belief, to say that a belief is true or false. But here, belief means something believed. It refers to a philosophical content of belief, not to the attitude or psychological state of believing. If, however, theism is defined as the proposition that God exists, and a theist as someone who believes that proposition, listen to this, Super Wavy, then it makes sense to define atheism, and atheist is an analogous way. This means first defining atheism as a position, as a proposition or position that it can be true or false, and can be the conclusion of an argument, which he doesn't go into. So let's pull it up. We're gonna have to pull it up because he's hiding information from you guys while I'm showing it to you. Right? So let's pull it up because he wanted to skip over things. So definition of atheism. So even though this whole first part is showing why we should use the standard definition, he tries to say, no, we don't need to because of one line. He says it ought to be, not understanding that the dude is about to explain to you ad nauseum why it ought to be. So let's get down here and get back to the point. This means first defining let's highlight it. This means first defining atheism as the proposition or position that it can be true or false and can be a conclusion of an argument. And second, defining atheist as listen to the Super Wavy, as someone who believes that proposition. Since it is also natural to define atheism in terms of theism, it follows that in the absence of good reasons to do otherwise, it is best for philosophers to understand the A in atheism as negation instead of absence, as not instead of without. In other words, to take atheism to contradictory of theism. Therefore, for all three of these reasons, He gave him 3 reasons. Philosophers ought to construe atheism as the proposition that God does not exist, or more broadly, as the proposition that there are no divine realities of any sort. So the question is, why did Pan purposefully misrepresent this argument in the debate, misrepresent this information in the debate? Why?
In front of him, because he shows a clear misunderstanding of what atheism is. But I came here to show that he also wouldn't be able to prove his God either. On this, the anniversary.
Oh yeah, we skipped back. We went back a little bit. So let's get back to where he was.
Of the day he jumped off the porch on me. So, you know what I'm saying? We're going to continue to play Where's Waldo Pandiego. Hopefully, the
1 minute.
show this guy that he came to prove to us. If not, we will be left with our hypothesis, or as our formula shows, with the hypothesis at 0 and the F never being fulfilled. And I'll end right there.
Demus ends with 30.
Yeah, how much pandering to atheists could he do? You know what I'm saying? How much more pandering to atheists could he do, man? And I think I did a good job of outlining the problems in his argumentation, outlining how he never actually went into his information. He never actually proved or disproved anything. He just gave his thoughts and opinions. And I have to ask, what type of judge takes thoughts and opinions and a person never actually going into depth into why what he said is true? It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And with that, I'll say I'm out, family. After I finish this, I'm going to edit it up, and then I'm going to do a review to just strictly the judge's comments and determination in the debate. With that said, man, y'all have a good and blessed day. If you made it this far, go ahead, like, share, and subscribe so we can get this up to 1,000 subscribers. Appreciate y'all. Bye.
Every time I come around, I swear I snatch that bitch about him. Ruben ass come around, I swear I slap the shit about him. Have his ass running around, crying something bitch about him. Cause he know James will fuck around and get that switch about him. Know what you started, stop acting fucking retarded. All your plans have been thwarted. Hayru's blood is in scarlet, cause he's briefly departed. Muzzle drugged up and scarred up, body quickly discarded. At his funeral party like fuck all these lies. Fuck all these lies. Fuck all these lies. Fuck all these lies. Naga will order, dry bones prepare for the slaughter. Still got the wife and the daughter. Check the tape and recorder. Don't show the reporter. This how the pussies get caught up. It's blood over swine every time that we slaughter, nigga. Fuck all these lies. Fuck all these lies. Fuck all these lies. Fuck all these lies. overcome.